Welcome, focused learners, to this explainer. Today, we're bringing some serious energy to a truly game-changing concept. We're going to master the empathy map, which is a huge cornerstone of human-centered design, and we're going to anchor the whole thing in Stephen Covey's paradigm-shifting principles from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you've ever felt like your conversations, negotiations, or problem-solving sessions are just hitting a brick wall, well, you are in exactly the right place.
Okay, let's dive right into this, because this idea fundamentally challenges our assumptions about how we actually interact with people. Imagine going to the eye doctor, an optometrist, because you're having trouble seeing. After just like 2 seconds of listening to your complaint, the doctor literally takes off their own glasses and hands them to you, saying, "Here, put these on. They've worked perfectly for me for 10 years. I mean, it sounds totally absurd, right? But psychologically speaking, this is exactly what we do to each other every single day. We prescribe our own lenses before we even bother to diagnose the problem.
So, here is our roadmap for today. 1. The illusion of listening. 2. Seek first to understand. 3. The empathy map template. 4. A sample question bank. And 5. Achieving synergy and win-win. Let's get right to it.
Section 1. The illusion of listening, or listening versus projecting. We need to kick things off by confronting a slightly uncomfortable truth about human nature. How often are we actually listening? And how often are we just projecting our own personal autobiographies onto the people around us? The source material draws a really sharp distinction here. See, autobiographical listening is when our primary intent is to reply, to control, or maybe even to manipulate. Someone tells us a problem, and our brains instantly go, "Oh, I know exactly how you feel. Let me tell you about my experience." We're essentially handing them our glasses. Empathetic listening, on the flip side, requires a massive mental shift. The motive here is solely to understand. It is stepping completely into their paradigm and seeing the world exactly as they see it, long before we ever try to offer a solution. Let's see how this builds across the 5 levels of listening. Most of the time, we operate way down at the bottom 4. We ignore, we pretend with a simple, "yeah, right." We selectively hear what we want to hear, or, at best, we're attentive to the literal words being said. But that 5th level, empathic listening, is an entirely different beast. It is not just some mechanical technique like active listening where you just parrot back what someone says. No, it is a total mindset shift, deeply rooted in your character and your genuine, honest desire to understand another human being. And that brings us to Section 2, Seek First to Understand. This is the Habit 5 foundation. It's the absolute crucial prerequisite step we have to take before we ever attempt to solve a problem or design a solution. Now, we really need to clarify a critical distinction here that trips up a lot of leaders. Empathy is not sympathy. Sympathy is a form of agreement or judgment. And sure, it can be an appropriate emotion sometimes, but people often feed on sympathy, and honestly, it can breed dependence. The real essence of empathy isn't that you necessarily agree with the other person, it's that you fully, deeply understand them, both emotionally and intellectually, from their own unique frame of reference. And this breakdown brilliantly illustrates why empathic listening is so much more than just hearing. Communication experts estimate that a mere 10% of our communication is represented by the actual words we use. Just 10%. 30% is in the sounds and the tone of voice, and a massive 60% is body language. So to truly practice empathic listening, you can't just use your ears. You have to listen with your eyes and your heart. You are sensing, you're intuiting, and you are feeling the reality inside another person's head. So why is this so incredibly powerful? Well, it's because it provides what Covey calls psychological air. Think about it. Next to physical survival, the greatest need of a human being is psychological survival. The need to be understood, affirmed, validated, appreciated. If all the air were suddenly sucked out of the room right now, you wouldn't care at all about this explainer. You'd only care about getting air, right? When you listen with deep empathy, you're giving a person that vital psychological air. And it's only after that deep survival need is met that you can actually move on to influencing or problem solving. Let's ground this theory in a real-world example from our sources. Look at this timeline for a training program for technical and vocational education training, or TVET, principals over in Kenya. These leaders are tasked with creating income-generating activities to fund their institutions. But notice how they don't just jump in and start brainstorming products on day 1. Instead, they learn the habits. And by day 2, they're actually sent out into the field to conduct real, face-to-face empathy interviews with staff, students, and employers. They gather raw, unfiltered data before they ever attempt to design a solution on day 4. which means we are now crossing into Section 3, the Empathy Map Template, capturing the data. We are moving from the psychological philosophy of listening right into the practical mechanics of human-centered design. It is time for our guided walkthrough of the actual tool used to capture this data.
Now, what's really interesting here is how this framework elegantly structures all that messy human complexity into 4 simple quadrants. When you're out there conducting an interview, you use the empathy map to organize what you are observing. In the says quadrant, you're capturing direct quotes and explicitly stated needs. But remember that 10, 30, 60 rule we talked about? We have to go deeper. So the thinks quadrant is where you infer their underlying beliefs and assumed paradigms. Does focuses on concrete actions and observed behaviors, like what are they actually doing? And finally, feels is where you map those intuitive emotions and deep frustrations. By filling out all 4 quadrants, you make sure you aren't just taking their words at face value. You are building a holistic, truly empathetic profile.
But it's absolutely crucial to remember that filling out this map isn't just some sterile, check-the-box administrative exercise. The real magic happens during empathy synthesis. This is the act of pooling the raw data from multiple empathy maps to identify hidden patterns and genuine root-level needs. This synthesis is exactly what turns messy, qualitative human emotion into concrete, actionable insights for design.
All right, Section 4, a sample question bank, extracting valuable data. So how do we actually pull this information out to populate our map? Let's simulate a quick interview skills lab.
Before we even look at what to ask, we have to establish what not to do. Because we are so deeply hardwired to listen autobiographically, we naturally fall into one of 4 trap responses. We evaluate, by agreeing or disagreeing. We probe, by asking questions from our own frame of reference. We advise, giving counsel based on our own experience. Or we interpret, explaining their motives based on ours. Our sources warn that if someone actually opens up their vulnerable soft underbelly to you, and you hit them with these autobiographical reactions, you will literally elephant stomp their trust and completely ruin the empathy interview.
Instead, we need a question bank built entirely on open-ended inquiries that absolutely avoid proposing any solutions. We're talking about questions like, what frustrations are you facing with this process? Or how do you feel when this happens? Or even just simply, can you walk me through your experience? These questions act like a blank canvas. They allow the stakeholder to fill the space with their genuine thoughts and feelings, which provides you with the rich, unadulterated raw material you need to accurately fill out your empathy map. Remember, you are diagnosing before you prescribe.
The early Greeks actually understood the sequencing of this perfectly through 3 simple words: ethos, pathos, and logos. Most people want to jump straight to logos, the flawless logic of their presentation or their brilliant, shiny new solution. But this framework shows that you absolutely must first establish ethos, which is your personal credibility. Then you have to move to pathos, the empathic side, proving that you truly understand their feelings. It is only after ethos and pathos are firmly established that your logos, your logic, can actually be heard and accepted.
Let's move to our final segment, Section 5, Achieving Synergy and Win-Win, Mutually Beneficial Solutions. We've gathered all this incredible empathy data. Now we connect it to our ultimate goal, creating mutually beneficial, highly sustainable solutions. As you'll see, the empathy map is really just step 1 of the broader human-centered design process. Once we empathize, we use that data to define sharp problem statements. These are often phrased as "how might we" questions. That leads perfectly into rapid ideation and brainstorming without filtering yourself. From there, the absolute best ideas are prototyped, for example, mapping out a business model on a lean canvas, and finally, they are put to the test for peer feedback. But here's the kicker. This entire structure totally relies on the accuracy of that initial empathy phase. If the foundation is weak, the whole thing crumbles.
So the crucial point is this. Empathetic listening and using tools like the empathy map are what create the ideal environment for habit 6, which is synergize. When we deeply, truly understand each other, our differences are no longer stumbling blocks. They literally become stepping stones. Synergy isn't some weak compromise where everyone just gives up a little bit. No, it is the middle way. It's a higher apex that creates a true win-win solution, one that's far better than what any individual could have possibly designed on their own.
Now, empathic listening is risky. It makes you vulnerable because to have influence, you must first be influenced. But the payoff is immense. You gain highly accurate data, you build massive emotional bank accounts with people, and you unlock unparalleled creative cooperation. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this challenge. Look at the problems frustrating you in your own leadership journey right now. Instead of handing out your own glasses, Whose paradigm will you step into today?